Hello everyone, in this video I'll be talking about how to make a custom input field. Okay, so before we continue in this video, first of all, welcome to the channel. In this channel I post videos on any computer topics I have struggled with in the past, and I break it down so well that even if you are a beginner, you will understand. So if I've struggled with something in the past, there's a chance that you're struggling with it now. So like this video, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you'll be notified when I drop a new video. Okay, now let's get into the video. So we have all seen input fields that looks like this. Okay, time and time again. Anywhere you go online, you're gonna see it, like in a login page and stuff like that. But what if we can do an input field that looks just like this? Okay. So this website is a side project that I'm actually working on, and I was trying to figure out how to make a custom input field, then I went through videos and videos because they were kind of complicated. So I want to make my own video that is simple to understand. Okay. So first, before I get into the coding, I'm gonna talk more about the idea behind it. Like, how does it work? Okay. Because if I don't talk about that, when I start coding it, it might look confusing. You might be like, okay, why is this there and why is that there? So first, what we're gonna do, I'm going to bring up my whiteboard and I'll talk about the logic behind it. Then after that, then we go into the coding. So if you guys want me to do a full tutorial on how I made this full page here, just let me know in the comment down below. But for today, we're focusing on just the input fields, how to make the input field. Okay. All right. So let's go into my Blackboard. This is my Blackboard. Okay. So now we all know that, okay, hey, look, this is the default input field. Okay. So the goal is to make an input field that looks sort of like this. Okay, so that is the goal here. Okay, so if you look at this one, this input field here, what is the difference between our goal and this input field? So you see that if I just copy this input field and I put it here, all right, so you will notice that, okay, hey, look, the only difference is this borderline, this line here, which is a borderline, and this borderline, it's not there. Okay, so let's erase it. Let's erase those borderlines. All right, so now we've removed those borderlines. Then you see that, okay, hey, what is the next thing again? You'll see that, hey, this, so we in HTML, we call this a label. Okay, so I'm going to name it here a label. So you notice that, hey, this label looks like as if it's too up. It's too up. It's like it's so far from this text here. So the next step is to what? Pull down this comment just a little bit. So I'm going to pull it down just a little bit to somewhere like this. Probably like this. Okay. You can even pull it down a little further. So what I'm actually doing here, this is what we're going to be doing in code too. Exactly this whole process I'm doing, we're going to do the same process in code. So I'm just showing you what is going to happen in code, how we got something that looks like this. Okay, we're going to be using code to get that. All right, so now what are the steps here? So if you look at our input field, you see the first thing, we need a label, right? So I'm going to write that in the board here. All right, and what is going to be step 2? So next step 2 is to remove all borders except the bottom border. Step 1 is add a label. So the next step is step 3. What did we do last? We pull down this label just slightly, a little bit. So I'll say pull label. All right, if you look at it, these are all the steps that we need. Okay, so all these nice, cool looking designs on using CSS and everything just comes down to, coding it out. Okay, having the idea down, having the logic down first. So we had the logic down. Now I want to talk about something very, very important. So the thing is this: you'll see this input field that looks like this, right? Then we have comment here. What we are gonna do, remember, like the goal is to what? Pull down the label. Because the thing is this: if we want to push something down using HTML, what we usually use is we use padding, to push it down. It doesn't really push down this thing. It doesn't really push down this, it doesn't push it down correctly. Okay, if we want to use padding. So instead of padding, we want to use something else. And for us to use that something else to pull this comment down a little by little, what we have to do first is to what? We are going to put the input field and the label inside a box, which we are going to call what? A div. So this is a div. So it's okay if you don't understand, when I start coding it out, you understand it. But it's just good for you to get the concept down. Okay. So we'll put this whole thing inside a div. Okay. Then what we'll now do, we'll now add a CSS property. CSS property position relative. Okay, I'll explain this later. Then for this label itself, remember this is a label. So this is a label. I said it here is a label. So for this one, we're going to add a CSS property of position. Then I say absolute. All right. So now let's talk about relative and absolute. What do they mean? What is the meaning of relative and absolute? Okay, let's talk about absolute first. When we use position absolute, this gives us, remember when I was telling you that the only way we usually move things downwards or move things left, right, or any position is to use padding, you understand? But another way is to use things like, let me show you, like you can say left 2 pixels, or let's say right, 3 pixels, top, let's say 1 pixel, something like that, and bottom, let's say 5 pixels. So in order for us to use, this is a better way of moving things around, moving it to the exact place you want it to be. This is what we can use to do that. Okay, you can move it slightly, a little bit to the left, right, anywhere you want to move it to. The only thing is this: you have to have position absolute. So now the place that you want to be moving this thing, like, okay, the place that you want to be moving this label around, okay, like the little confined space that you want to be moving it around, this is why I said, okay, we're going to put it in a box. Okay, that box, you have to give that box that you be moving this thing around, that little space that to be confined to, you want to give that box a what? CSS property position relative. Okay, so the issue is this: if you don't give this guy position relative, when you say you want to move left, top, right, bottom, this thing, it's going to move this label based on the whole page, which you don't want. So that means, like, let's say, let me give you an example. Let's say the label is here and you have a box, but you don't give that box, you don't give it position relative. You don't give it position relative. You don't do that, okay? You don't do that. When you now move this thing left to right or whatever, it's going to move it based on the page, the main page, which is the body of the HTML, instead of just the div, which is the box. Okay, I don't know if that explains it. I will show that in a video, okay? So that is why we're gonna need position relative, for the thing that this thing will be moving around in. Okay, we're gonna give the box position relative so that when we move this label, it's going to be moving relative to this container's position. Without this position relative, it's going to mess up the whole where the thing is going to be placed. Okay, so I just wanted to explain that really well. Okay, so this is very, 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 very important for you to understand this. Okay, so now let's actually go down into coding. This same concept, I use it to make this profile icon here. You understand? Okay, I use it to make this profile icon here. So that's why I'm telling you, I'm trying to explain the logic to you so that you don't just code, you don't just look at the code it for just input field, then use it for just only input field. You can use it for other things aside from input fields, okay? So now let's actually go into the coding part of it, okay? All right, so we'll be referencing our notepad as we are coding it. So as we look at our notepad, what is the first step? The first step is to what? Add a label. So that's pretty easy to do. So now we'll be looking at this side, so that we can know. So let me add this highlight. All right, so we'll be using this window here. So the first step, so this is the body of the whole page, you understand, where everything is going to be placed. This is the body. So the first thing we're going to look for for this input, okay? So this is a button, which is the add comment button. So now we have the inputs right here. So the first thing we have to do, we have to add a label. So a label, think about a label as a decoration for an element. So an element is like a button, can be an input, okay? So now let's actually make a label. So we'll say label. So label will have that. So instead, what I'm going to do, so the thing is this. I'm going to make this label and I'll say comment. And I want to put this inside what? A bold. Kind of destroyed that already. Say comment. All right. So you'll see here, you see the way it looks like now. So let's add a colon. Think we do that. And now you see the way it looks like. Okay, it looks like this. So now what I want to do, I want it so that this comment goes on the top. Okay. For me to do that, what I would do, I'll go space here, then I'll put BR. Okay, so BR is like a space, to give it a space. So make the next thing go to the new line. Okay, so we have a label here. Then we now have what? Space, new line. Okay. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, so it looks like I have this name equals to my input. Okay, wow. So we have double names here. So let me remove this. So guys, we have an input field that looks like this. So what we're gonna add, we add ID, which is going to be called what? A comment. All right. So I have ID comments. Then what we are now going to do, we've added a label already. Okay. So now we want to tell this label that, hey, label, you are for these inputs. What we're going to do, we want to have a for attribute here under the label. Then we'll now pass it comment, which tells it that, hey, look, label, you are actually for this input. Remember I explained that label is just a decoration for an element. So an element can be a button, it can be an input, like we're using it here, so let's look at it now. So you see that if I click here, you see it highlights, but you'll notice that if I click on just the label, it still highlights it. Why? Because we've linked this label to this input. Okay, so you see if I remove this connection here, you will notice that if I click comment, nothing happens. So the comment doesn't know that it's for this input. So now what is the next step according to our guide here? So the next step is to what? Remove all borders except the bottom border. Okay, that's the next step. So what we're gonna do is this. Before I start anything, I want to like beautify all these things here. Okay, I want to beautify all this stuff here. So I will go to Bootstrap. So I'm in Bootstrap here. So I'm gonna copy just this button. So I'll copy this button and I'll paste it there. So I'll say add comments. That should be, just say add. Okay. Okay, just add. Then what I'm not going to do, I'll go to the buttons again. So I'll go to the home tab here. Okay, which is the home tab of the Bootstrap. Then what I want to do for it to recognize CSS, I'm going to copy this link here. So I copied it by clicking here. So then I'm going to go to the head portion of my HTML. Then I'm going to I'll paste the link there. Okay. So that's just to kind of beautify the whole thing just a little bit. So that's just to beautify it just a little tiny little bit. Okay. All right. So now you see the way everything looks like now. So cool, nice. So nice. And now let's actually work on this in a little bit. Guys, the next step here is to remove all borders except the bottom border. So that's what we're doing now. So we have the inputs here. So the input has the ID comment. So we're gonna copy that ID. Then we'll go to the CSS page. Then we'll put hash for starters. Then we'll put the comment there, which is ID. So what I would say, I'll say border. It was 0px. Okay. Then border bottom is gonna be equals to 1px solid black. So now you see that it just has just the bottom. So now you see you have an issue here. What is the issue? Once I click on this input, it highlights everything. Okay, so you see if I refresh, and you still see it still has that same issue. So what we're gonna do to fix it, then you say outline, then you say none. Okay, so once you do that, that actually fixes that issue. You see, now you see it doesn't have that issue at all anymore. Okay, we know on iPhone, you can test it on iPhone. On iPhone, when you click on this, when you click on it on your iPhone, this actually highlights its own, it's still highlighted just like the last time. So what I usually add to remove that effect from iPhone, I'll say border radius is gonna be what, 0 pixels. Okay, that is going to remove that issue from iPhone. Okay, so yep, so everything is looking nice, everything is looking crisp and nice. So now here comes the issue we're talking about. You see this comment section, it feels too far from the input. Okay, so let's actually fix that issue. How do we fix that? As you see, step 3, pull down the label a little bit. So to do that, what we need a full div, which is going to be holding the comments, which is our label, and the input. Okay, remember we have a button too. So we're going to have to put the button inside the div. You understand? So I'll explain why in a bit. So we have this. So now what we're going to do, I'm going to go down into the HTML page. And this is where the label starts from. The label is here. This is our input field. And now this is our button. Okay. So let me space it out so you see it pretty clearly. So this whole thing here, this is what we're going to put inside a div. So to do that, I'm just going to say div. So a div is just like a container. Okay. So a div is just a container. So I will put the bottom half of this container. So I'm telling it, hey, container, cover this label, input field, and button. So this is the starting portion of the div. This is the ending portion of the div. Okay, ending portion has the slash. Okay, so now let me show you something about a div. Say div, what a div does, it's like a container that covers the whole thing. You understand? But the only issue with divs is a div, the height is just the height of the things it's covering. So the height is going to be from here to like here, but the width is going to be the whole page. So that means that if I put this button outside the div, it's going to push the div, it's going to push this button to the next line. So you'll see, I'm going to click on this white space. You will notice that this white space is going to highlight the div. You see, it's highlighting the div. You see this blue line here? So that blue line is showing that that is the div. You see, I'm highlighting the div here. So this is the div. It's highlighting the whole width of the whole thing. So if I put a button outside the div, it's going to push it to the next line, and it's not going to look nice. And even though I change the width of the div, it's not still going to put the button to the side of this input. Okay, so that's why I have the button inside the div. You will notice now, let me put the button outside the div. You see what I'm saying? And you will notice that look, it makes it to the next page because why? The div covers the whole width. And you will notice even though I change the width of the div, so let's actually make an ID. We'll make it what? We'll call it what? A container. Because that's what it is, it's a container. Alright? So now even though I go to the CSS property of container and I say, hey, the width is going to be, let's say 167 pixels, you'll still see that this doesn't change. But if I highlight the div, you see that the blue marker is now here. You understand? The yellow marker shows where it was before you applied the CSS. Okay? Okay, now the blue marker is right here. It doesn't still move this over. Okay? So that is why we are gonna put a button So we'll put the button inside the, so we are going to put the button inside the div. So this is the button, and I'll take it and I'll put it inside the div right here. So nice. So I'm actually explain the steps with you little by little, because so that you understand the step, not just copying the code. Okay, not just typing down the code. I want you to like understand the steps too. Okay, so let's actually go with this. So we've added a container, okay, which covers the whole, it covers everything, covers the comment and the line. So now the next thing is to what? Add position relative to the container. Okay, and you see that's what we're going to do here. We're going to go to the, we'll go to the style side. We have ID, say container, and we're going to say position, then you say relative. Okay, relative, position relative. Then now what's the next step? Now the next step is to say position attribute for the label. Okay, okay, so now where is the label? So this is the label right here. We have to give an ID for this label. So you say ID instead of ID, you understand? Let's change all this to class instead of an ID. So for this ID, we change it to class. Do you know the reason why? So that if you want to make multiples of these lines, these custom lines, you have to use class. Okay, so you have the container here, which is class. So the label, make the class, then say cause my label. Okay, so that is that. So for inputs, ID is what? Comment. So you can have different inputs and stuff like that, different input name for it. But let's make a class for that. Then you say custom inputs. Okay, so the reason why I'm using a class, remember, like if you want to use ID, okay, ID is just references only one element. Okay, only one element can only have an ID. But once we are using a class, we can use multiple of that element. You know, you can use this class name here for multiple elements. You understand? Okay, because like you see in my edit page, I don't just have only one input. I have multiple of these inputs. I have another input here, another input here. So that's why we're going to be using class instead. Okay, let me close this. All right, so we changed the class here to container. We changed the class for label to my label. We added class section here, input. Okay, but hey, still leave the ID for comments here. Why? Is because you see this for, okay, it's referencing this ID here. So that is what's giving it this effect that once I click the label, it activates the inputs. Okay, so don't remove that. All right, this name comment is just something I added because of my code. You understand? You don't have to add that, but yeah. Okay, so let's actually continue. So now let's go to the style CSS. So this is actually the inputs here. Okay, and we named it something different now. So we named it a class custom input. All right, so I'm gonna change that to a class of what? Custom input. Then we have our container right here, so we change it to a class. Okay, I put a dot instead of a hash. Okay, just for you to understand it. So cool. So now remember the next step. What is the next step now? The next step is to what? Add position absolute to our label. Okay, so this is our label right here. So this is our label right here. And now what we're gonna do, we're going to add my label. That is the name of that is the class for that label. We're going to be editing it. We're going to put position absolute. So now we've done that. So now this this position absolute is now going to allow us to do things like left, to move it left or right, you understand, top, bottom. Okay, but now the thing is this: if you want to move it left a little bit, what you have to use is right. You use the opposite. So to move something left, you use right something. To move something up, you use bottom. Okay, that's just the little catch. You understand? You have to use the opposite of what you're thinking in mind. Oh, I want to move this comment to the right. I will use left something, what amount left, and the amount of pixels you want to move it. Okay, so now so cool. So now let's move this comment down a little bit. So that means I will use what? Top. Then I will say, let's say 30 pixels. Let's see what happens. You'll see that it's going to move it down to this portion here. Okay, you moved it down 30 pixels. It just moved it down here. Okay, so now you'll see, that's too much, so we have to reduce it. So you see, even though I click here, it still types in and everything. It looks kind of messy. Okay, so let's reduce this small. Let's say 10 pixels. Let's see how it looks like. So you see, that's even like the best way to leave it as 10. Okay, so let's actually refresh. So now for some reason the whole thing moved out. That is very weird. Don't really know why. So guys, change this to my container, and this, and the container, we change it to my container. Okay, we change the div to my container. Okay, and continue. All right, so nice. So we are back in here. So you see, this is the way things are. You see how perfect everything looks like now. You see the way everything looks like. It looks really, really nice. So that's actually everything, nothing much. And you see, I actually just added everything. So now this is optional, if you want to do some other things. So there's still something you can do. You see the way these keys look like they're floating, like these words look like you're floating. So you can actually fix that. So the thing to do to fix that, what you can do, you can say height. So you are changing the height of the input field. Okay, remember this is our input. Okay, so the input here, this input here, we're just changing the height of it. So let's see the height of the input right now. So inspect. So the height is about 27 right now. Okay, so let's see if we can change that. I'll say height is going to be, let's say, 19 pixels. Let's see the way it looks like now. Let's see. So now if I say GHG, so you see like the G is going into the floor. So let's change it to like 22. That is kind of better. Now, most people might not like it. So let's say GG. So you see the way it stays on the line. Then you say B, H, stops like that, K, ING. You understand? Aside from that, okay, it looks like this box looks a little kind of funky. So let's see if you can find a button for like smaller size. So we'll just copy BTN SM, which is small button. So let's go back to the to this button section here. Then I'll add this BTSM. Okay, that which will make it a smaller button, so that makes it look small more better, hopefully. So now we see that okay, this has affected the placement of the comments. First of all, let me just remove this button thing here. Think I'll add it to the bottom. Okay, let's shift it to the bottom. So let's add it to the bottom. Let's remove it from the div. So I'm going to remove the button, add the button here. So for you, you know, you don't really have to do all of this. This is just to beautify the whole page. Okay, just to beautify this whole page. But you see that I have comments here, then you see the label, it's kind of covering the top of this. So let's actually work on that. So what we're gonna do, we are gonna push the label up just a little bit. So that means I have to reduce the top. You know, I'll reduce it, let's say by 2 pixels. So I'll say 8. You know, that's going to push it up a little bit. And now you have yourself an input, a custom input. Okay, so now I can actually do this, put that there, click add, and you see it actually adds it in. Okay, so that is actually the custom input. All right, so guys, like you see now, this is a custom input. Okay, you can actually use it anywhere you want. Okay, and now I can actually make multiples of this input. Okay, so I can actually make multiples of this input. So we see that, hey, this whole container, you see this container here? This is the thing I can just copy and copy over and over again. So I can just say, hey, I'm gonna copy this container, and this is gonna be another input field, a custom input field. So this is another custom input field. Then for this input field, I'm going to say, I'm going to call it what, like, you know, ID. I'll just call it a test. And the name is going to be what? Test. Remove, this name is not important. You can just remove the name totally. So I'm going to remove the name for this one anyways. I removed the name. So yeah, it's going to have a class custom input. So the for is going to be called what? Test, which links this label to this input. Okay, and that's mostly it. And when you do that, so I'm supposed to have it's not doing. All right, so you see that I have 2 inputs here, one called comment, the other one comment. So let's actually change the other one to, let's say, label, no, test. Okay, so I'm gonna do that. Then you see that now this is test. It's called test. Okay, so you see, so this is just a custom label you can actually use, you know, instead of the default, you know, stuff that you're used to. Okay, you can just use this, and this is a little better. You know, it's, you see the G, see the stays on the line and stuff like that. All right, so that's everything. If this video helped you, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and comment down in the video below. Just comment down thank you, you know, or anything, you know, that shows that the video helps you. And the goal of this channel is to reach 100 subscribers. Please help us reach that goal by subscribing. All right, okay guys, thank you for listening and have a good day.